So, as I'm sure many of you know by now, last night went probably worst case scenario for those of us on the left. On top of Trump winning the presidency, Republicans also took a 62-seat Senate majority, and it seems like they're going to maintain a House majority as well. This only stands to give more unchecked power to Trump and Republicans, including free reign at Senate confirmations if 2 seats do indeed come up. So, Trump is going to get to mold the Supreme Court for the future generations. It seems that the biggest outlier of this election is Trump retaining with white women, seemingly it not being affected by Roe v. Wade the way that Democrats would have wanted, and by gaining massively in Latino voters, a phenomenon that I personally will never understand. It sucks because Kamala definitely ran a good campaign. I think that she did the things she needed to. She put her message across pretty well. She had a strong ground game, but in the end it was too steep of a hurdle for her to get over. And with the trend in voting, if you look at all the different elections statewide as well, it just seems to signal a right-wing shift in America being the biggest reason rather than anything personal to Kamala. No, the third-party vote didn't cost her, so we can't say that, right? I'm sure being a nothing woman didn't help, but ultimately I believe that America showed it still leans right inherently, and that's something we're all going to have to come to terms with. And I think that recovering from COVID and the effects of that were a stain that would have affected either president's party. Trump kind of got away with it because where the bad things from COVID happened with his presidency, it was right at the end, and then he could say, oh, I passed it off and this and this. But for Biden, they had to deal with it for years throughout most of their presidency, so it kind of left a stain on the Democratic Party, right? It doesn't matter that we recovered faster than other countries or that we're in a relatively good place now with inflation and other things. People felt the effects of the pandemic, and correlation is a strong thing for most people. They don't really care about causation. They just remember Democrats were in office when prices went up. It's Democrats' fault, Democrats bad, right? That being said, I don't think all is over for the future. The map looks pretty solid in 2026 in terms of us gaining seats back in possibly both houses of Congress, if not just the Senate or the House. And I'm a firm believer that most of the real work, the real progress to be made happens between elections, not in an election cycle. Making sure that we educate ourselves, educate others to the political landscape, to social issues. We fight for causes we believe in, and that we make awareness for the things that need changed. It's the real time to get past the buzzwords or the talking points that kind of stink or cloud up the election cycle and campaigns, and we get to the core of what needs fixed, and we let people know these issues do exist, right? Doing the work on the ground to open people's eyes is the best way to prepare long before an election. That way you're not trying to rush and say, oh, well, this is at stake, and this is at stake, and this is at stake. These people should have known already because we should be doing the job to teach them and let them know, right? And it's something that I personally can't wait to get back to doing. You get caught up in the election cycle and covering the election, and then other things you want to cover fall out of the cycle. There's still a genocide in Gaza. There's still practically a genocide going on in Sudan and the Congo. There's still horrendous intervention in Haiti happening. Things that I really wanted to talk about, but when you're trying to save American democracy and domestic issues and talk about these things, it's hard to cloud them back up. So I'm glad that I can get back to that we as a channel can start focusing on that. And it's just important to remember that no, we didn't get our way. Sometimes in democracy you lose. You can't always win in democracy, but I think one thing we can hang our hat on is not doing what MAGA did when they lost. We're not going to cry about it the next 4 years. We're going to focus on the next issue. We're not going to storm the Capitol. None of these things are going to happen, which does bring up a kind of interesting point, right? I'm hoping that the 2020 election deniers can start to disappear now and shame themselves, because what's the narrative going to be, right? They rigged it in 2020, but the Democrats just forgot to do it this time in 2024. And I'm sure they'll still find some way to cope and say, no, they did rig it, but in this one we made it too big or something of the sort. It'll be some kind of line, but that in between, of course, them just bragging about winning, which is also awfully telling, right? Most of these people don't actually care about politics in terms of this is genuinely what I think will make America better. They just want that tribalistic sports mentality. So when they win, they're just like, oh, I can dunk on you and own you, and then they're not going to care about politics in 6 months. So it's kind of frustrating when these things are happening, but it's all part of the process. I guess at least the hype for them will die out in weeks or months, right? Worst part is going to definitely be the bots in my comments, but together, I'm sure that we can manage anything. And with that being said, however, reach out to the women in your life, reach out to your trans friend, your immigrant friends, and make sure they're okay. Let them know you'll be there for them. It's going to be a scary few months in preparation for what's to come, but I don't think it's something we can't get past. I won't stop what I'm doing. I'm going to keep putting the focus on the issues that I think the focus is needed. Progress can still be made on the ground. We don't have to wait for Donald Trump. The presidency isn't going to affect our day-to-day lives that much. There is some dangers, obviously, to worry about, but on a local level, you can still enact change. On a state level, you can worry there. And for me, I'll be doing the due diligence, 3 videos a day still. We're not slowing up. Interviews on interesting subjects, on topics that need covered, and trying to move the needle any way that we can. And I hope you'll be right here with me watching like you have been throughout the election cycle, and also doing your part politically to help not only politically motivate but educate voters, because when we mobilize educated voters, we win, the left wins, but we just weren't as powerful this time. I think it speaks to the misinformation, the misinformation machine that Republicans have, their ability to utilize their grasp over media to control what the narrative is going to be. And it was just too many things for Democrats to really defend or overcome. There's like lying about trans stuff, there's lying about FEMA stuff, lying about the election and the prosecution stuff, lying about Kamala's history and record, lying about one thing to the next. And it was just people feeding their information through social media, where all they're going to get is these kind of headline takes without any context or anything provided. Democrats just didn't have anything to combat that, and I think that that's really what solidified this. But that's exactly why we need to use this extra time in between the elections to our benefit, where the left seems to be a lot more politically active and engaged, whereas the right, as it is now, just comes around during the election year again, wanting to dunk and hang on the rim and whatever else, right? So we need to be spending our time correcting misinformation anywhere we see it, calling out propaganda when people are trying to push it, and working to make social issues more mainstream of a conversation. We'll chip away in 2026 at the majorities. Hopefully we can take them back. And in 2028, we'll make sure that we're finally ready for what's next.